So the topic for this evening is the effects of opioid substance misuse on family members and loved ones. So tonight's focus this evening surrounds family. The traditional family unit has been changing over several decades, and family can range from the traditional family as defined by Oxford Dictionary as a group of one or more parents and their children living together in one unit. In support of those individuals who may not have grown up in a more traditional style, there are many families where children have been raised by grandparents, single mothers, single fathers, adopted children, blended families, older siblings raising younger siblings, etc. The definition of family, as defined by Lilo of Lilo and Stitch, says, Ohana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten, which expands the definition of family and helps people feel less isolated and excluded. Your family unit is your family unit and includes whomever there is to support and nurture you. Dr. Rao, will now join in the conversation and the discussion about opioids in the family.
It's very important that families be involved in individuals who actually have become addicted to opioids. And that's very, very important for a number of different reasons. Most of the people who are addicted to opioids didn't choose to become addicted. As you can see from the previous YouTube presentation, most of the people became addicted by use of opioids because they had some kind of painful situation, trauma, damage, a number of different things. And in the process, they actually became addicted. The family is very, very important for individuals to get involved for a number of different reasons. Families can be described by any number of different ways. Americans believe that medication prescribed by most physicians must be safe. But one of the things we have to go back to and remember is the fact that medications actually do more than just one thing. And of course, we know now from experience over the last couple of decades that opioids particularly, and especially the synthetic opioids, are highly addictive and very difficult for people to overcome the addictions. Why do families matter? That's the question you're probably asking. The worst part of the addiction story or pandemic is not just the individuals who are affected by the drugs themselves, but those who suffer along with them quietly sometimes, the members of the family, the fathers, the mothers, the siblings, the aunts, the uncles, cousins, friends, relatives, associates. No one wants to see their family members addicted. And the members of the family or I could call them that, the members of the family suffer disproportionately in a different way than the addict themselves, because they want to see their loved one back to normal, functioning normal without the hindrance of pain medications or anything else. So the family suffers along with that individual. So it's something that we must keep in mind at all times. Families have been torn apart because of opioid addiction. The story we just heard described how that family was torn apart. The mother lost her daughter, first to drugs and then through murder. The suffering is untold. As a matter of fact, we're right now, in this country right now, in the United States, we are beginning to see the effects of the pandemic of COVID-19 to subside somewhat. It seems like it's somewhat under control. However, it's just the opposite when you talk about the opioid crisis, the opioid pandemic. The opioid pandemic seems like it's picking up steam, as a matter of fact. In recent reports that I've heard and read in scientific literature, is that the opioid crisis, as was announced on that film as well, won't actually seem like it's coming into control until after the year 2020. Well, we're in 2021 now. And the recent reports are that the opioid crisis is actually accelerating. It's getting worse, folks, not getting better. And it tears families apart wherever it strikes. The opioid pandemic affects families. Pregnant women, for instance, if a pregnant woman is actually taking drugs, particularly opioids, she will come up with a number of nutritional deficiencies. The B-complex vitamins, which are extremely important in developing the nervous system. Folic acid, which is very important for developing the spinal column. Those are things that actually affect pregnant women. An unborn child can develop what is called a neonatal abstinence syndrome. And that is a situation where the child is addicted, born addicted to drugs. And it affects their mental development, their brain development. It limits the size of the brain, also helps, causes problems in terms of learning as the child goes older. It affects their intelligence. It affects the whole environment around. The home environment is very severely affected, because when you have situations where the mother or the child are both addicted to drugs, you can imagine what kind of environment the child will be in, a very serious child environment. Parents with substance abuse or disuse are more likely to abuse their child. It could be sexual abuse. It could just be physical abuse, beating on them, slapping them around. It causes all kinds of frustration among the parents as well as the child. So it's a very, very serious problem. Older children can become parents. Sometimes that's not in the plan, but it actually happens. So the opioid pandemic affects families in so many different ways that we probably never even imagined. And the most important thing is that most people who are addicted to the drugs do not realize how much it impacts those who are related to them. There are several ways. Stress. Can you imagine? Maybe you can't, but I can, because I've observed it. The stress, worrying about someone who's addicted to opioids. You don't know if you're going to get that call someday saying your relative has died or is coded or is in the hospital and brain function is almost minimal. It causes financial strain, very serious financial strain, simply because many times people who are addicted to drugs, and particularly opioids, can't be trusted. Family members have difficulty time trusting them. And there are those who are fortunate to have insurance that covers opioid addiction and other substance abuse addictions. They have it, that insurance doesn't cover indefinitely. When that insurance coverage runs out, then the individuals who are addicted to drug has to find some way, a manner of supporting their recovery. So the family has to come together and decide how they're going to go about financing the recovery of a family individual or family member who is addicted to opioid drugs. Relationships, there may be a time, you never imagine yourself having a difficult time getting along with your relatives, but there are times when you just can't live with them. And so they have to find another way. A lot of the people who are addicted to opioids and drugs have to be dismissed from their homes because their parents, siblings, other members of the family find it extremely difficult just to get along with them. They wake up, they're irritable, they're frustrated, all kinds of problems. And so there's a strain in relationships among siblings, strain in relationship between parent and child, strained relationship between husband and wife if one of them is addicted to drugs. So relationships are challenges. Then, of course, there's the problem of codependency. Codependency is a serious problem. If you have a family member or a loved one who's actually addicted to drugs, and opioids particularly, you want to do all you can. And sometimes we reach out to them in love, trying to help them, and we allow them to get away with a lot of stuff. And actually, we become codependents because we support their bad habits, their behavior. And some people can see that as a form of encouraging them to continue on in that behavior, but it's not. It's a form of codependency, and I don't think anyone really wants to be a codependent in that kind of situation, but it often happens. These are some of the ways families are impacted by individuals who have opioid addictions. When is it time to get help?
So that's a good question. But I think as soon as the person recognizes that there is an issue, then a problem, that they need to get help.
It's important that the
Yeah, go ahead.
individual understand education. Education is the key. Education is power. And when you begin to understand addiction through education, then it's important that the person reach out and get help. Change it, because there are so many changes that take place in the individual. There are changes in the brain, physiological changes. There are also anatomical and structural changes in the brain. The person has a difficult time dealing with reality, identifying problems with substance abuse, understand the signs of addiction. We went through that earlier, and of course, we're going to go through a couple more points tonight that are important to understand and recognize when a person actually has an addiction to a substance or even opiates. Encourage a loved one to get help. Now, it's important that we encourage a loved one to get help, but one of the most important things we must remember is that the loved one must recognize that he or she has a problem. And because you can't force anyone to do anything, even by law, you cannot. So once they recognize they have a problem, then they must admit, they must say to you or to someone, loved ones, or even to a counselor, I need help. So once they make that acknowledgement, encourage them to get help. Then it's important for the family and other friends or associates or whomever to step in and help them to get the help that they're asking for. Talk to them about it. Give them some incentives to get enrolled into a recovery program. Give them some leverage. By that, I'm saying, if you can do so and so and so and so, we can help you come back to the point where you are before you got addicted to these drugs. The earlier we get the help for that individual, the more likely we are to reduce the potential for harm, because drugs affect most of the major organ systems in the body, the brain, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, you name it. All of these systems affect not only behavior, but mood as well. So as soon as we can get them the help, the more important it is. And one of the challenges that I think was mentioned in that tape is that one of the problems people who are addicted to drugs, particularly opioids and heroin and things like that, is they're afraid of trying to go cold turkey. I've worked with individuals who've tried to go cold turkey and breaking drugs. It's a very miserable situation. They go through diarrhea, they can't eat food, they can't hold anything down, they have fevers, they have all kinds of symptoms, they're irritable, they're difficult to get along with, they go through chills, they go through all kinds of problems. And so if we can get them to admit that they have a problem, just reach out and help them get some help, that would reduce potential for harm going on into the future. So the sooner we get them help, the better off they're going to be.
I agree, yes.
Prevention. Prevention was mentioned earlier in the presentation this afternoon. It's always better to prevent a problem than to try to resolve it once it develops. And this is especially true with individuals who are dealing with drug addiction and substance abuse. If they're having pain or something, it's always good to try to find other ways of dealing with the pain. And the opioids, the fentanyl, for instance, right now, fentanyl is the #1 drug right now, synthetic opioid in the country now, that's causing a lot of the substance abuse, also leading many individuals into overdoses. And the problem with fentanyl is much of the stuff that's being sold on the black market now is actually not pure. And so some of the side effects people are getting from it can't even be predicted. So it's important that we give them some tips, and particularly important that we keep our children away from these addictive substances, because children will see family members, you're trying to help a family member, and it seems like that individual is getting a lot of attention. And kids are very honest with us. If they see that member getting a lot of attention, they may think of this as being something very. I mean, maybe I can get some attention, or I can get things working my way if I do something like this. So we want to give children proper education about staying away from substance abuse, about alcohol, tobacco, any of the addictive drugs, and particularly opioids and drugs of substance abuse like heroin and cocaine and things, crack and things like that. Education is extremely important. We can't overemphasize that matter, that education is extremely important. The earlier we define, sometimes we have to recognize that this is why it's important. Education is important, because education helps us recognize some of the signs and symptoms of an individual who is addicted to drugs. The changes in mood, shifts in personality, behavioral changes. If individuals start doing things or saying things that you're not accustomed to seeing them do, that hygiene habits and appearance, they just go, let themselves go without washing, don't take baths, don't wash up, don't keep clean clothes, and then letting their health go down. They're not as attentive to their health as you normally know they would be. These are some early signs that something's wrong, and usually symptoms and signs of addiction of some type. And cocaine and heroin and also opioids in general can show these particular signs and symptoms.
Dr. Ralph?
Yes.
Before you go on, there was a question in the chat that asked, how can the family support the person who's addicted? What is the best way that they can support them?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think the best way you can support them is to love them. You will see these changes in mood and personality, behavioral changes, changes in hygiene and appearance and physical health. You'll see these things taking place. But don't abandon the person. Don't cast them off. One of the problems you find in opioid abuse is isolation. Many people who actually get hooked on these drugs do what they do in isolation or solo, or they do it only with those individuals whom they know as partners with this situation. So what you want to try to do is bring them to the point where they recognize they have a problem, love them for who they are, not for what they're doing, okay? Give them all assistance you can. Give them unconditional love. It may not be easy, didn't say it would be easy, but it's very important that you give them continuous support and encouragement along the way. If you don't, there's another thing, it's called tough love. Now, tough love says that you give them support and encouragement, but at the same time, you say to them, look, we cannot allow you to continue stealing money from people, because sometimes people addicts rob from their own families just to keep drugs on the table or keep supporting their drug habit. But you want to love them, to give them tough love, give them respect, give them treat them equally the way you would want to be treated, and just continue to help them and encourage them to move in the right direction, get the help and the recovery that they actually need. Acceptance, tough love. Now, you're not accepting, because you accept the person, does not mean you're accepting what they're doing. And that's one of the problems I think some people seem to have. Some drug addicts tend to think that because I'm accepting them, I'm accepting their behavior and what they're doing as well. You're not doing that. You're accepting them as a fellow human being, as a member of a family. Remember, as a member of the human family, we are our brother's keeper. And so we have a responsibility. If we see a person going in the wrong direction, we need to be patient with them. Don't give up on them. Please don't give up on them. Seek help for them, professional help, and then help them to get that help. But as far as I'm concerned, prevention is the key. And once you get that help, try to situate it in a way that you help them, prevent them from getting back into that same old rut. They may go into a relapse. They may relapse and fall off the log a couple of times, but don't give up on them. Be patient, be kind, be loving, but don't let them go into isolation, because that's where a lot of people who go into isolation actually prolong the drug habit as well as causing deaths. A day in the life of a person. One of the situations I dealt with was a situation where a young lady was raised in a family up until she was about 10 or 11 years old, was raised in a family of both parents were addicted to drugs. They were both heroin addicts. And heroin, of course, is an opioid drug. And what they did is they realized her aunt and uncle assume legal responsibility for her until she reached the age of 18. Now she stayed with them from the time she was 11 up until she was 18. They raised her. She went to high school. She finished high school and even went on and went on to college. She graduated from college, but about the time she was 21 or 22, around the time she was finishing college, it dawned on her that she thought that her parents had abandoned her. She recognized her aunt and uncle as her actual parents, but her biological parents, she felt had abandoned her. And she went into a state of depression. And as she went into this state of depression, she in turn, now remember, being in an environment where this person's using drugs is not a good example, but she reflected back on her parents. She had actually watched them use drugs. And she started using drugs herself. She got addicted, unfortunately. And in the process, she went back and she went into that habit. But one of the things she did for herself is she felt that because she felt that her parents had abandoned her by pushing her off onto her aunt and uncle to raise her, is that she wanted a family of her own. And she wanted to prove to herself that she'd never abandoned her. She'd never abandoned her child or whatever. Well, she met a gentleman who married her. And they had a good relationship going, and he was very supportive of her. By the time she was 23, I think, she had a child, her first child. And she had the child. Her husband was there for her. He stood by her, even though he knows she was having some problems with the drugs. And one of the things I learned from that situation was the fact that he did all the things that he should have done. He was there to love her, to support her, to encourage her. And he never gave up on her. And he, as best he could, he kept her away, kept the child away from drugs. Now, fortunately for her, the child didn't show early in the stages and didn't show any residual effects of her drug use. So they were fortunate in that respect. But those kinds of things happen in the life of individuals who are actually drug addicts.
Thank you, Dr. Joy and Dr. Ralph. Does anyone have any other questions?
I see here you have a number of resources that
Yes.
utilized to help families in this crisis. Yeah, some very good websites.
And these will be posted on the website as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.